Studying at Oxford was for me a life-changing experience. Every note week, like a hungry man who didn't see food for a very long time, I would go to my college, St. Cat's, and there they were laying all the model handbooks of whatever was offered in the next trimester. And I was looking at these handbooks and just collecting them, going home, reading them carefully, and then decide which of the modules, which of the courses I'm going to take. On an average, I attended 6 courses per trimester. I studied for my DPhil more than I studied for my BA, although at Oxford, students who are doing DPhil are just required to do a dissertation. And I was fortunate to study with some of the most magnificent brains that you can imagine. Among my teachers were my supervisor, late Jeffrey Marshall, was a witty, sharp cookie. And my unofficial supervisor was Isaiah Berlin, the great historian of ideas. Every meeting with him was for me just an adventure. And R.Cohen, magnificent brain philosopher, Bernard Williams, Robert Bob O'Neill, who became personal friends until today, David Miller, Joseph Raz, Ian Brownlee, Michael Walzer, who passed through Oxford and taught a course for 1 trimester, and many others. But first among equal was Ronnie Dworkin, the sharpest person I've ever met in my life. I never saw him losing an intellectual battle. I used to attend all the courses that Ronnie taught between 1987 and 1991 at Oxford, and was privileged to attend his seminars that by nature were restricted in number. The best seminar I've ever attended in my life was delivered by Ronnie in 1991. Ronnie was writing at that time his book, Life's Dominion. And we, a group of 12 people, the majority were, of course, master students, and then me, who just enjoyed and relished going to classes. And we were the guinea pigs. He just experienced on us whatever he was writing. So each and every week, he provided us with a chapter of his forthcoming book. The book was published in 1993. And we were invited to comment, to criticize, to have a debate, discussion. It was a fascinating experience, something that I relish for the rest of my life. Now, at that time, I was doing dissertation. My dissertation was about the boundaries of liberty and tolerance, which was published as a book in 1994. Totally different from the topic of his seminar, Abortion, Euthanasia, Dementia. I attended this seminar only because of the lecturer, not because of the topic. I came to it as a layperson. But this was an accident that was transformative in my life, because after studying with Dworkin and opening up to the ideas of end of life, I decided that my next big project is going to be end of life. And one of the lessons that I learned from Dworkin is the importance of fieldwork. You see, Ronnie was an intellectual, brilliant man, sharp, legal and philosophical mind, but he was not a social scientist. So when he wrote Life's Dominion, he was relying on his intellect, intuition. But I don't think that he ever stepped foot in the hospital or research center to examine to what extent the ideas that he was preaching are actually valid in a hospital setting. And I decided that my approach as a social scientist would be to supplement this. And Dworkin was able to convince me that people have the right to decide the moment of their death, and that sometimes suffering is so great that you may entertain the idea of end of life, ending the patient life with the help of physician. However, it did not persuade me that whatever he held as a very wide brush that is suitable for everyone has a right to end life. I thought that as we are talking about life and death issues, we should be far more careful. And because I'm not a physician, then I have to examine what the physicians are saying, and not only the physicians, all the people around the patient's bed. So in 1991, at the end of 1991, I embarked on what became a journey that is still going on, in which I went and visited dozens of hospitals in 9 countries. And at the beginning of my journey, I believed that there is a right to euthanasia. Philosophically speaking, I thought that people should have this right to end their life with the help of a physician, and that euthanasia is a good idea. So the first country that I studied was Israel, and then England, and then Canada and the United States, and then Netherlands and Belgium, and Australia and New Zealand, and in the past few years, it is Switzerland. I didn't have time to sit down and write a book because I didn't have sabbatical at that time. However, in 1994, I was invited to the Hastings Center, New York, and this was a marvelous place because it is small and it has a very rich library in medical ethics. So I was just sitting there in the basement and picking whatever I wanted and having discussions with Dan Callahan and others who were in the center. And it was marvelous, and I enjoyed it so much. And apparently they enjoyed my company. They invited me again in 1999. However, at that time, there was only one country that practiced euthanasia. Although there was no law, but this was the Netherlands. But they had been practicing euthanasia since the late 1960s. And I decided it's impossible to write a book in which I preach euthanasia without visiting the Netherlands. So I was looking for an opportunity to come, and I started to look for an opportunity only after 1995, and the opportunity came about in 1999. At this point, this book that you see here, The Right to Die with Dignity, was more or less finished. What was missing was the introduction, the conclusion, and chapter 7 that concerns the Netherlands. As I said, I felt that I must investigate what is going on in the Netherlands. In 1999, the Dutch government provided me with a scholarship to go there and spend the summer in the Netherlands. And whatever I thought up until that point, and bear in mind, I started my journey in 1991. I've published in few articles in which I promoted the idea of euthanasia and justified that. And then in 1999, I'm coming to the Netherlands, so 8 years behind me, in which I'm preaching euthanasia. And when I left the Netherlands, after that visit, I was no longer persuaded, convinced that euthanasia is acceptable. I'm going to explain why when I'm going to speak about my other book, which is called Euthanasia in the Netherlands. And then in that video, you can understand and appreciate the reason why I've changed my mind. So you're welcome to watch that video. When I finished this field trip in Netherlands, I was fortunate to be a Fulbright scholar at UCLA. And I didn't want to think about whatever I saw and heard in the Netherlands for a period of time. I needed to relax. My mind was boggling. And I decided to write another book, Speech, Media, and Ethics, for the next few months. So I was dealing with totally different issues. Free speech issues, media ethics, totally different. But of course, when I was walking, when I was swimming, when I was not dealing with my teaching and writing the book, Speech, Media, and Ethics, of course, I was reflecting on what I heard and listened to in Netherlands. And this is when I realized that I could no longer support euthanasia. So I wrote the chapter 7, I wrote the introduction, I wrote into the conclusion, but I had to rewrite the entire book. Because as I said, when I wrote this for 8 years, the premise was pro-euthanasia, and now I no longer support euthanasia. However, I do support physician-assisted suicide. So the entire thesis had to be changed from pro-euthanasia to physician-assisted suicide, explaining the difference between the two, and explaining why I endorse physician-assisted suicide and I vehemently against euthanasia. So this book, The Right to Die with Dignity, is the product of 9 years of my life, of thinking, of research. And I consider this book as one of the best books I've ever written. And I'm very proud of this book. I invested a lot of thinking and research into that. And I hope that I triggered your attention enough for you to have a look at that. So you're welcome to read, to comment, to debate, and please do get in touch if there's anything that you'd like to share with me. Thank you very much.